today we've got Matt from the OC Supertones. Matt, this kind of feels like a dream come true because obviously the OC Supertones are just like a legendary band in the Christian alternative music scene, which, you know, a lot of the bands that Cullen and I chat with, not all of them, but certainly a lot of them come from, you know, like the Tooth and Nail world or Solid State Records or, you know, like adjacent, you know, type of alternative Christian music labels. So this just feels like a dream come true to chat with somebody from the OC Supertones.
That's a very circumscribed world you just
yeah, all three fans, we've
joke,
got all
man.
three of them listening to us.
That's how we make our bread and butter, though. I tell you what.
Hey.
So yeah, we're big fans, and you know, I know I just mentioned
happy that anyone cares. I'm happy that anyone still cares, but it was our first record came out 30 years ago. So.
Isn't that wild?
Unbelievable that it's been that long, but yeah, I mean, Supertones, I know I was just mentioning this right before we started recording, but Supertones were one of those bands when I was like maybe 7 or 8. I got a CD for maybe Christmas or something, and I got a CD that had all the VeggieTale characters, but they all had mohawks. And it was like the first moment where I was like, okay, I can listen to music that sounds like the kind of music I want to listen to, but it's approved by my parents. And and obviously Supertones were on this like Veggie Rock CD. I forget what song did you do? Water Buffalo? What one?
No, we did I Can Be Your Friend.
I Can Be Your Friend. That's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I again probably was like first or second grade, and when I would like do the dishes for my chores, like I would be putting that CD on, and I was jamming out. And so Supertones have been a part of my life for a very long time. Even though I probably would be considered one of the younger fans of Supertones, they have been a part of my life for a while.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, my kids actually request that song from time to time, and you know,
it's a banger.
It is. And here's the thing: is my kids don't really get the whole Supertones thing, but I think that the fact that we did a VeggieTales song on like a actual legit canonical VeggieTales album is the thing that makes them say, "Oh, Dad actually did something with music." Right? I could tell them
you are legit. Like you actually are a legit musician according to your kids
because of VeggieTales.
I love that.
That's fun.
That's funny. What is your favorite? I mean, maybe it is your guys' cover, but what is your favorite cover off of that album?
Oh gosh, I feel like Reliant K had a terrific one.
Pirates Who Don't Do Anything.
The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything. They had a real. I think Steve Taylor even produced that particular session, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And Steve Taylor has, besides being a great producer, he has a real gift for the quirky. And
very much so.
And so, yeah.
Well, and Reliant K did too, especially at that time of their career. Like they were still kind of a goofy band, and so it fit perfectly for them at that time.
Yeah, they're hysterically funny and also musically talented. And also, you know, the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything as a song is probably the apex of VeggieTales.
I think you're up there. I think that's a fair take. Even if I don't know if I disagree with it or not. I have to think through that. But
the Pirates
it is certainly
took on
a fair
life
take.
of their own. The Pirates were stars in and of themselves. They were hysterical. They did a whole movie featuring them. The Jonah movie.
It's true.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember
That's
that?
true.
You can
So
tell
I was
kids,
able
right?
I was able to bully Reliant K into playing Pirates Who Don't Do Anything a couple years ago when they were on their tour. And I think right before they played, I like tweeted something out about, you know, if they don't play that song tonight, then I would declare Switchfoot as the greatest 2000s Christian rock band. And one of the guys, I think it was probably Schneck. Yeah, I think Schneck found it or heard about it, and they sort of know us a little bit, but he got a hold of it, and I think he was able to get Matt to like, all right, maybe when we're like in between songs tuning our guitars, I'll just play like a little rendition, and they did, and it got on like Relevant magazine and everything. It was kind of a cool little moment.
Really?
Yeah.
Relevant magazine is still publishing?
Oh yeah. I don't think they're doing print media
physical
anymore, but
yeah,
it's all digital.
Yeah, no one is, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Including HM magazine.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mason's first experience with you is quite different than my own, though. Mine is a little bit in the opposite direction. So I remember going with my older sister to her youth group, which was very, very cool in town. It was called U-Turn. And it was in an old warehouse, which
It
that was a
wasn't
big
called
thing
the
in the early
edge or the
2000s.
upper room. I feel like edge and upper room is 90% of lit youth group names.
Lit, especially that is exactly the right way to say it, because it's no longer cool to say lit, right? Just one step behind the Christian culture is, right?
That's right.
But I remember going with my sister, and I was way young to be there, and she shows me this record she wants to get, because they had like a little like CD stand in the back that you can get cheap records, and Chase the Sun was there. And my sister's like, should I get this one or should I get, I don't know, Casting Crowns or whoever it was. I can't remember. And I was like, well, definitely not Chase the Sun, because that looks like Mom's big band album that's in her car. It's like the exact same font and everything. So I told her to go get whatever the other album was. But
You made the wrong
so I could have
choice.
been a diehard OC Supertones fan from age
When
7.
was that?
What's that?
When was that?
2000.
The year 2000.
Yeah.
So
you
just
were
after
still
Chase the
around.
Sun came out.
Yeah.
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 I mean, for its time, that album was pretty jamming.
Oh, I'm sure it was great. It was the.
I mean, I know that
it was
Casting
just the.
Crowns is a bigger band than us, but I mean, come on.
It was
Snooze
just the
fest.
connotation of my mom's, big band collaboration.
Yeah, that
album,
sort of
and-
that classic cursive sort
Yeah,
of font.
that's what it was. That's what it
I don't know
was.
who picked that, but they lost us a fan.
7-year-old fan. Yeah.
Yeah,
It really
Hey.
hurt you.
been racking in that money.
Yeah, exactly. The all important 7 to 9 year old demographic. Need to
So-
get those kids.
Matt, it's fun to sing your praises. I will say though, you aren't the first Christian ska band to be on the BlackSheep Podcast.
true.
We
but
have
we're the
had
biggest.
Leonore from Five Iron several times now, and
love
she's become a
Leonore.
dear friend. But I just gotta, I want you to know you are our sloppy second for Christian ska bands.
Yeah, no, Five Iron, of course, is an amazing group and love them very much.
Good folks. Yeah, and you're in Colorado now, right?
Yeah, in Denver.
Yeah, it's kind
It's
of
funny
funny to
'cause-
think that, it's like, I think most of the Five Iron people are still in Colorado. You're in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of funny that, there's just, I don't know, this weird little Denver thing going on with Christian
Mm-hmm.
ska bands.
Yeah, but I mean, nothing's going on because we don't
Right.
play any actual ska. Yeah, and Reese lives in Virginia, so go figure that.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that he's out there.
Yeah,
Well,
I moved here, and I was like, Reese, we can hang out. He's like, I'm moving away. That was 13 years ago.
You should have just commandeered 5 Iron. That's what you should have done.
Yeah, just become
just take
the
it over.
new singer of Five Iron.
Just put
I
on
don't- I
some
don't-
horn rimmed
I-
glasses and step up on stage. You're good to go.
Reese's top range, I don't have it. That high tenor, I can't get there.
Sure.
Sorry to say.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, let's stop talking about Five Iron because they are inferior to the OC Supertones.
I
So
mean, some
let's
would
talk.
say that. I wouldn't say that on a podcast.
But some would say it. Some would.
So some people say that. I mean, they say it.
That sounded very Trumpian of you. There.
It did.
Not gonna lie.
Yeah, you don't take ownership over it.
I
but
mean, I
some
don't
would.
know.
Some would.
I don't know. Some people were saying it. Who's to say?
Well, let's talk about just your history. Maybe before you actually started Supertones, let's talk about
Sure.
just how you got into music in general. Like what made you just want to, start singing and playing music and all of that? Like what was the impetus for that?
So my older brother kind of discovered the whole rock and roll thing. Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, Motley Crue. This was the
God, your
the
brother
late
and my
80s.
dad should be friends.
Maybe. And he got a guitar. And so in the same way that younger brothers have to play Luigi instead of Mario, I got a bass. And
Sure.
and I think that the real appeal, it was undeniably cool, but also at 12 years old when I got a bass was when I was first interested in girls, and I had no plan
Yeah, those
of
don't go
how
together.
I was going to make that happen. Huh?
Yeah, those don't go together. I mean, what was even the big bass line in
Hey,
the late 80s there,
yes, But I'm just saying, being in a band generally was a good plan.
That part was, yeah.
To my 12-year-old brain, you know, I was looking at how ugly all these guys in the bands were, and they were famously pulling left and right. And so I said, okay, I'll do that because I've got no better plan.
No, there's no better way to get girls than to start a Christian ska band. That is the best way to get girls.
Well, at that point, I was not raised in a Christian home at all. And so I was more aspiring to maybe not be Guns N' Roses, but perhaps Great White. If you guys can't go that deep.
Yeah.
Bang Tango.
Yeah.
Huh? Tora.
Okay.
Anyone? Rat. Oh, that's a good group actually. And so you know, it was partly love of music. You know, it really was the first thing I loved in life. It was the first thing I got into. I wasn't very good academically. I wasn't very good at sports. And so it was kind of like the world that I fit in with, and just connecting with other musicians in junior high. You know, it kind of gave you a social circle to fit in with, and when you know you brought an instrument to the table, it made you a someone. So there was definitely that too. And so you know, I wasn't very good, but I was writing songs right away, like just these nonsensical songs that I would write with my friends, and you know, not real bands. Like we never had a drummer or a singer. It was just like me and my friend who played guitar. And or you know, like instrumental rock bands, because that's the one thing that was really hard to come by, was a singer. And so I think when I was freshman year, I had a public performance for the first time at high school, where at Capistrano Valley High School, so in San Juan, California, at lunchtime we would have like bands, like local bands or bands within the school play. And this was like the apex, you know, like if we could just get on the lunchtime stage. And I ended up being the singer, and we did Paranoid by Black Sabbath, and we did Antisocial by Anthrax, which I think was actually a cover from another band. And so that was like my first foray into singing. And so ever after that, because I was the only one who was willing, would sing in bands. And so when I was 14 years old, also that freshman year, I got invited to play bass in a local Catholic, well, of course it's local, in a Catholic church youth group. And so that was the first time I had ever been in a church. And, you know, I was like this pot smoking, acid dropping, getting in fights at lunchtime kind of guy, and was just kind of like I wasn't anti-religion or anything like that. I was just really confused as to what was going on, and I just, sitting in there, considered the question of God for the first time, of like, what about this? Look at all these people praying. What's that priest talking about? I didn't understand a word of what was going on. It was just kind of I don't know. I think God was moving in me, though, through that. Yeah. And so over that year, I just became curious, and our born again neighbors, as we like to call them, moving from New York to California, we heard about these born agains. My born again neighbors, awesome family, the Collins family. They're awesome to this day. Had given my brother a Bible, and so I just started reading that Bible. It was before the Living Translation existed. It was the Living Bible, and it just said the book on the cover. I still have it, and I just started reading that, and out of curiosity, and over that year of just reading the Bible, I said, well, I'm not totally sure what this is all about, but this is what I'm about. And it was then that, like right going into my sophomore year, that as soon as I became a Christian, I also started the Supertones, what became the Supertones. Oh, wow. With a friend at high school, the guy who invited me to the Catholic Church. Yeah, and so that was the beginnings.
Wow. I mean, at some point, you move from playing Anthrax and Black Sabbath to, you know, obviously eventually something like ska comes around. And I'm trying to remember, maybe it was you guys that, like, I'm trying to think, like, I think I saw you guys, like, on that Tooth and Nail documentary where you guys used to have, like, an entirely different sound. right? And then like moved into more of this like ska direction that obviously like really catapulted Supertones to this kind of new level. Can you talk about that, maybe that time frame of like you guys,
Yeah.
playing your own music that maybe was way different than ska at the time, and then eventually what
Yes.
that story was of kind of like being convinced that okay, maybe we need to make a new direction musically.
Well, when I was 12 years old, I was into all like the, for lack of better term, butt rock stuff and metal, and I still love all that stuff. Like, to me, Bon Jovi and Motley Crue stands up to this day, as does, of course, Metallica. But, I kind of got into, when I was 13 years old, started listening to the more alternative stuff, as we called it back then. REM, Jane's Addiction. Jane's Addiction was a really big one. And so and Red Hot Chili Peppers was like my favorite.
Right.
And so also in my freshman year, I had a friend who introduced me to the Specials and Operation Ivy, and that was a huge game changer. I saw in 1990, I saw the Selector on their comeback tour up in Redondo, and when I went to that show, I was like, oh, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And so just that's when I fell in love with ska, when I was 14 years old. And so
Wow.
it was all of it. And so when we started the band that became the Supertones, it was a potpourri. It was a little bit Red Hot Chili Peppers one song. It was a little bit, our best approximation of Operation Ivy the next song, and it was No Doubt. They were really jumping off back then. They were massive in SoCal before they broke nationally, and so we were just playing all these different kind of musics and getting nowhere. And so the real shift from the prior band to the Supertones, where we became more successful, was instead of playing different musics song to song, we used ska as like the mainframe, sort of. I'm misusing that. The main framework. And we put in hip hop and punk rock and all the other things that we were into. Ska is a very sort of flexible framework that you can work with, which
Right.
kind of is evident over the years and how it's changed and accommodated, like, more R&B or mod or whatever.
Well, tell me the story of you convincing Brandon Ebel to sign you then, right? Because that's a
It
whole
was
thing,
not
right?
It was not
For some
Yes.
reason, but wasn't there like somebody locked him in a room and what? Or am I mixing up that another band?
That is correct. No, it's us, but it wasn't me.
Oh,
It
it
was
wasn't
Jason
you.
Carson.
Okay.
So our drummer,
okay.
Jason Carson, that was really so. As soon as I started the band that became the Supertones, it was with this other guy who had invited me to his Catholic church, and we like had a friend who was a drummer who wasn't very good, and he quit on us after like a month. We're like, oh no, what do we do now? and we got connected through a guy in another band at our high school to Jason Carson, who went to a different high school. And so when he joined the band, that's he. If you ever meet Jason, he's just got so much can-do attitude, enthusiasm, all that stuff, right? He was just born with it. And so that's when we really that's when we really became a band. And so, yeah, I still think of the core of the Supertones as it's me, it's Jason Carson, and it's Tony Terusa, because we were the band that was kind of what was left of the prior band when we started the Supertones. And of course, Darren, the chief, our trumpet player, was with us like a long time too. But no, Jason was the sort of the organizational driving force behind the Supertones. I think that it could be said that Tony and I were responsible for the music and everything from, promoting shows and knocking down doors and all this. And knocking down is the right word for it. That's all Jason. That's 100% Jason Carson. The dude just has hustle. And he's got, as we say in the good language, chutzpah. And so the story is, and I actually in the liner notes to the vinyl reprint of the Adventures record, I tell this whole thing in depth. So buy it, everybody. Anyway, so the story goes, and this is true. This is 100% true. So Jason promoted a series of really successful shows in SoCal at our church. It was called April Fest. And April Fest got bigger and bigger over the years. You know, the scene in Southern California was really burgeoning at that point. I think I've never heard of a scene like it since, but every weekend, hardcore bands, you know, punk rock bands, they were playing shows and they were getting packed. It was getting bigger and bigger. And so April Fest, I think we could fit about 800 people, which was unheard of at that point. Like, it used to be a Christian show in SoCal was like 50 people. We're like, yay, 50 people were there. And so he would do, it would be the 4 weeks of April. There would be a show every weekend. And he booked MXPX, who had just put out Poconacha. And MXPX was the apple of the tooth and nail eye, and Brandon Ebel especially. And for us, you know, it was tooth and nail or bust. There was only one label in our minds. Every other Christian rock label was hopelessly lame to us. And so Brandon came down for MXPX's first show outside of Washington. And needless to say, it was packed, and it was the first really... Actually, we were still called by our old name then, but we had developed our new sound, but Jason booked us as the opener. He booked his own band as the opener. And he put up MXPX and Brandon at his parents' house. Quite generously, I might add, giving up his bed for Brandon. Now, the morning after the show, they had to leave to catch the plane, and we had to sending in demos to Tooth and Nail for years at that point, and they had passed on us because we weren't very good, to be honest. And so Jason took the opportunity, as Brandon is kind of packing up his stuff, and he goes in the room, and he says, "Hey, so you saw us last night, our new sound and everything. What do you think? You want to sign us?" And he's like, "I don't know, I'll have to think about it." He's like, now I don't know exactly what he said, but as Brandon was starting to leave the room, Jason got between him and the door. And I guess some would say that would be holding him against his will in a room, might fit some definitions of kidnapping. And he said, "Brandon, you're going to tell me right now, you're going to sign us, yes or no?" And Brandon said, "No." And he's like, "Okay." But subsequently, later, as he was listening back to kind of our new stuff, he did hear, like, okay, this is a different group. They've found their thing, and ended up signing us. But it would have been better if he said yes in the room.
Yeah,
but,
a lot less nerve-wracking for sure.
No, he turned us down. But that is... So I say this in the liner notes too. That is on the lower part of the greatest hits of Jason Carson's acts of audacity. Like, Jason, that is a medium, right? The dude just, honestly, Supertones would have gotten nowhere if it wasn't for Jason being Jason. You know, he just goes after things like no one I've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
He is. It is awesome. He's like that to this day. Just all the guts and backbone in the world, and will to make things happen.
So y'all get signed, and y'all started to pick up steam really fast. At least from my perspective. Overnight.
Yeah, no, that's true. So we became the Supertones in '94, and yeah, I think the first show where we really, so we we played that April Fest show, but that was that's our people. That was the church we went to, and so we were well received there. But we were always kind of like the opener no one cared about in the scene. And then it was a show. It was 1995. It was called Lollapalooza at Point Loma University, and I remember Sixpence None the Richer was headlining that year. Do you guys have any memory of this? Where are you?
No,
we're
in the
nowhere
Midwest.
near California.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're in South Dakota.
Yeah, we grew up in the middle of nowhere
South
in South
Dakota?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where.
So,
that's not
Point
where I'm at
Loma-
now, but yeah, in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota. So
Point-
I can assure
Point
you
Loma
there
is
wasn't
gorgeous.
much. Okay, it's good to
It's
know.
on the cliffs above the beach in San Diego. It's
Gotcha.
Right.
like if someone's out there considering where to go to college, I mean, you can't beat Point Loma for scenery.
The name of that
Anyway.
fest sounds cheesy as hell, though. Not gonna lie.
Lomapalooza. It was a good festival. I forget everyone, but I do remember Sixpence None the Richer way before Kiss Me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Was headlining it, and we played a mid slot, but it was as the sun was going down, and we were, as we started playing, there was just a few people kind of checking us out, okay, but as the show went on, like it got, like, there was a lot of people, and they were really cheering, and they were really dancing, and it was one of those moments where we said, what just happened? And we kind of became the talk of the town after that, and that was after we were signed and after we had cut the record, actually, but the record hadn't come out yet. And so that was when we kind of had the first inkling of, oh, this is actually going somewhere. This is actually catching on.
Yeah, it felt like probably like your movie moment, right?
A bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say that when we first started to develop the real ska sound, it was the first song that we did like that was called Never Wanna Fall. Listening back to it now, it's maybe not our best song, but we had recruited horn players, and I had come in with this song, and Tony, during rehearsal had come up with this horn line, da 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 da. We didn't know how to write horn lines. Tony's just a very, I don't know, he was definitely the best player in our band, but he's just he's a good musician. He just is.
Sure.
I think if he had wanted to, he could have just played bass professionally, like as a studio guy. But when we ran that, like, he shows the horn line to the horn players, and I was the guitar player back then, playing guitar and singing, and we ran that song for the first time, and it's just like we're all looking at each other like, what just happened? Like, are we suddenly a good band? Like what is this? Like, we just leveled up, and so there definitely are those moments of like, of when you start to feel it. Like, did you watch the movie Straight Outta Compton about NWA?
Yeah.
So, you haven't seen that one, Mason?
I'm trying to think if I've seen it or not. I definitely know about it though.
Yeah. So there's a scene in it where they're doing, what's the song called? The one where Eazy-E raps. It was their first hit.
Straight up. No, sorry.
No, Straight Up is Paula Abdul.
Yeah. No. No, I was thinking his solo.
Yeah. No. It was
I don't remember what the
my
first one
six
is.
full, and that's
Is
all.
that,
Yeah.
Gosh,
But
what is it?
bum bum bum, that song. So when they were recording that, they were working on that, and they were listening back to it, and everyone was just so excited. There's just this energy in the room, and Jason and I talked about that of like,
is it
yeah,
Boys
we
in
know
the
that
Hood?
feeling. Boys in the Hood, thank you.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
The boys in the hood are always hard. Come talking that trash, we'll pull your card. And so just that we could definitely relate. I think every band who gets somewhere has that moment of like, because it's necessary that you suck for a while, and you got to go through that. It has to come out for you to improve and kind of find your sound. And when it does come together, when the chemistry actually happens, it is an incredible feeling. And so yeah, definitely that Point Loma show, definitely when we started to catch on. We thought we were great up to that point, but that's when anybody else noticed.
What is it about ska in particular that maybe captures you? Like obviously you mentioned like, one of your guys' first shows is with like MXPX. Like you guys could have totally gone down just like straight up punk route. And obviously you definitely have like punk elements within your whole discography. But what is it about ska that like captures you? Because like when I think of ska, it's kind of hard to believe that like such a genre ever existed. It kind of to me reminds me of like a platypus of music. It's just like why and how did this ever happen? So it's just to me it's like maybe one of the strangest music genres that ever at least had like some level of success at one point in music history. So I'm just curious, like for you, like what is it about it that maybe is like infectious or captures you?
Mm-hmm. Well, it is interesting how at certain times and places, certain sounds catch on. And maybe subsequent generations don't hear it the same way. I get that, right? Like if you listen to the Lemon Sisters right now, we're probably like, oh, that's weird. But like it was the jam. It was Uptown Funk back in the day.
Yeah.
It just caught up. I think for me, the dancing part of it definitely, right? Like shows where people were dancing. Like that was amazing. Like we didn't dance. We didn't know how to dance. It was grunge and it was all this stuff of like, just bang your head or whatever. And it's like, you could dance with girls to this music. Yay. And so that's definitely part of it. But I think just, just taking the first band I heard was the Specials, and just something about just the groove of it, the way it moves, and also it's just musically bigger, than like 3-chord punk, where there's different things happening. You have horns happening, right? There's punk. I love punk, but it is, there's only so many options. And with ska, there's a lot of different feels, and there's a lot of different ways you can go with it. As if you listen to a sampling of kind of the great ska bands, it all sounds pretty different. I guess it got pigeonholed at some point, but it was just big and exciting, especially live.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to communicate because I get it. Like after a while, it's like people listen to it now, they're like, that's not that good. But back in the day, it was the most exciting thing going.
Yeah, I don't know if people do say that about it today, though. Some are saying that, and I think I would agree that there's a little bit of a resurgence coming around with ska.
As much as anything can be resurgent, it seems to me that nothing new is happening anymore. It's all regurgitation.
Yeah, sure, I understand that.
Third wave ska was a new take on what had come before. And I haven't actually heard a new sound in rock, hip hop, or ska, since in hip hop, I think the last new thing is like Kendrick, maybe Migos. That's a while ago already.
Yeah.
Everything else, it's repetition. And then in rock, the last time I heard something new was Jack White.
Excuse me, have you ever heard of Imagine Dragons? Wow.
That's awesome.
It is Cullen's favorite band.
Is it? I'm sorry.
Yep. He really loves Mormonism.
Well, I do love Mormonism.
Yeah, they're
There's
Mormons.
no doubt about that.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, isn't it kind of weird to think, between the Killers and Imagine Dragons, like maybe two of the largest rock bands of the last 25 years, they're both Mormons.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about that.
Well, actually, speaking along those lines, this is something that Leonore, Cullen, and I have talked a little bit about before. I'm just kind of curious, like maybe your own reflections on this. But it does seem like, in comparison to other music genres, the Christian influence in a particular music genres, in a particular music genre, it does seem like there was maybe a disproportionate weight of Christian influence in like popular ska, especially in the late 90s, in comparison to other genres, like whether it's alternative or pop or hip hop or whatever it might be. And I think like maybe the like, I'm just trying to like, like you guys were massive in ska. 5-Iron was obviously big as well, and so there just was like this like larger Christian representation within popular ska in the 90s that like maybe the closest we got to like that in pop was maybe a little bit of Amy Grant. In hip hop, the closest maybe we've ever gotten in kind of in terms of Christian representation is maybe like
Lecrae. Yeah.
Lecrae.
Yeah.
You're saying
like,
where?
There just was like more
these other things. It's like it's like whatever's happening in rock is it's like the terminus is in the Christian world, whereas 5-Iron and the Supertones were legitimate contributions to the sound.
And more so than any other genre, especially at the
right.
I mean, I definitely think like you have to look at MXPX. They definitely they took that 3-chord melodic punk thing to its platonic ideal, basically. Not too many others though, huh?
Well,
but I'm just trying to.
If you think about it this way, if you were to like come up with like a Mount Rushmore of genres within each genre, we could come up with one for hip hop, we could come up with one for country, and so on and so forth. But if we were to come up with one for ska, specifically like third wave,
the third wave,
you're gonna be a part of that conversation in the Mount Rushmore of ska.
Like top 4.
Yeah, I think so.
That's all I'm at. No, because
especially in terms. Okay.
It's Boss Tones, no doubt, and I think Real Big Fish has to be above us. I don't like their music, but they definitely were more successful than us.
Well,
I think you're in the conversation.
Like, if somebody is to write a history of third wave ska, it would be remiss of them to not include OC Supertones and 5-Iron. Whereas if somebody were to write a book about 2000s hip hop, they're likely not going to include Lecrae. Right. So there was this like outsized Christian influence in especially third wave ska. Honestly, I think the closest we've ever seen to like that kind of influence in a particular genre, like a Christian influence in a particular genre, would be metalcore. Like many of like it would be like if you were to write a history of metalcore, like especially 2000s metalcore, you could not name Under Oath, August Burns Red, Devil Wears Prada. I do think Christianity had an outsized influence in that particular genre. But I think there could be a claim to be made, especially if you even include the insiders in this, that third wave ska kind of had a similar kind of at least Christian third wave ska had like a really outsized influence in third wave ska in general.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe that's also part of the Tooth and Nail effect. Now I know that those other two groups weren't on Tooth and Nail, but you got to credit Tooth and Nail with signing stuff that was legit.
Right.
Like
that's why we're fans of Tooth and Nail.
Yeah,
it's because it didn't make me feel as a Christian. Didn't make me feel like a loser for picking up one of their records.
Right. And so when I first became a Christian and I was kind of taught, you could only listen to Christian music, I was like, okay. Like, it was always the diet version of whatever music you were into, right? Not, I don't want to bang on any of these bands, but it was almost metal. It was almost rock and roll. It was almost whatever. It was almost hip hop.
It was like always very cheesy. It seemed like
it was pumped through the Nashville system,
right, and a watered down version of it too.
Yeah, I think the talent was inferior too. I don't think like One Bad Pig would work. Like it's just they would have been like 50th tier in the punk rock world if it wasn't no offense to One Bad Pig or their fans, but there just wasn't anything out there that was as good, as the general market music that I was into. Right. And so when Tooth and Nail came along, and those early records were rough around the edges, but it was legit. It was people who inhabited those worlds. It was kids from those scenes that were starting these groups, and so I think that would be, hip hop had a long time of developing before Lecrae spoke into the conversation. If you had put Lecrae out if Lecrae was Lecrae in 1986. Then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, it's a time and place kind of thing. And I think that, 5 Minute Walk was definitely piggybacking on what Tooth and Nail was doing.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, but likewise had some legit groups there like Five Iron.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously people have lots of thoughts around Brandon Ebel and everything, but to his credit, he wanted the music to have integrity. Like, I think from
Absolutely.
like that Tooth and Nail documentary, he said something along the lines of the music has to hold, like, it has to be able to hold itself up on its own without like the fact that it is going to be marketed to Christian moms and teenagers. Like the music has to hold up on by itself.
Yeah, I mean, those early records, a lot of them were not commercial.
Yeah.
Like they had some. I think that MXPX was the first, or Plank Eye and MXPX were kind of the biggest commercial hits in the early years. But you look at Blenderhead, you look at 90-Pound Wuss, you look at this is not this is intense, hard stuff.
Yeah.
Like it was for real.
It was cred stuff. I mean, it's cred music.
It was, and they did a great job with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to give it up.
So, yeah. Anyway, I was just always really curious around kind of this idea that it does seem that Christians just have a disproportionate amount of influence in third wave ska in comparison to any other kind of music genre. I just find that really interesting.
But as you say, with Tooth and Nail was putting out those groups Under Oath and all this stuff. I'm not really into it, but I get it. But it was as that music was burgeoning, not after it was already well established.
That's true. That's true. Fair enough.
And so yeah, I definitely think it's the Tooth and Nail effect.
Yeah, without a doubt.
That's a good explanation.
Let's talk about.
Let's
let's talk
on the
about.
spot. It's pretty good, huh?
It's pretty good.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Let's talk about just kind of maybe towards the end of things for Supertones. I would imagine a lot of kind of the recent developments of like the breakup in the like kind of mid 2000s, and then reuniting for a little while and then breaking up again. Like, I would imagine a lot of that is just due to people having families and getting full-time jobs and just life happening. But just love to kind of hear that part of whatever comes to mind right away when you think about that part of Supertones history. What comes to mind for just kind of the breakup and all of the just that part of its history?
Well, I think that it's hard for people on the outside to understand when this kind of sounds kind of weird, when you hit right, like the amount of pressure and stress that gets introduced into your system. And I was 19 when our first record came out. Right. I was like 21 and very immature when our second record came out, and we were on MTV and Billboard and all that stuff. And the other guys weren't much older, but they were somewhat more mature. And so to begin with, pressure on immaturity is a bad thing. And I definitely think that internally our system became tense and contentious to a large degree. It wasn't always like that. Like, we still had a lot of fun, but it was different, And so I think that when you have that combined with the pressure of the inevitable with ska bands, it's like it's a pretty quick whatchamacallit, popularity wave.
Sure.
When you look back through the history of ska, kind of the shelf life seems to be 4 years. We did better than that, but it's inevitable. And so I think that as our sales were going down, as we could feel the popularity going down, and we're still trying to make it work, when you get an opportunity when you get offered full-time work in something that you love, which happened for some of the guys, and internally it's like, well, this isn't as fun as it used to be anyway. I think that there's a push and a pull there to say, I'm going to move on. This was great, but I'll move on. And so that happened just multiple times. I was the last one in the group. I was the only one who was in it the whole time. And so it was hard, definitely. But yeah, when we started playing shows again in 2010, I think there was I hope other people enjoyed it. I think it was mainly for us.
Yeah.
because
Sure.
I think for Jason, Tony, and myself, there's a lot I regret, honestly, about how I treated everybody, and just how I didn't realize it at the time, just how my immaturity was responding to pressure, and being tired. That's another thing. It's just the sleeplessness of being on the road. It's a grind. And so for us to do a record and do a bunch of shows and just enjoy each other and enjoy what we were doing, and just to be grateful with no pressure, because we had all moved on to different careers at that point. And we all had families and we were all doing great. And so that time, that sort of, I don't know if this is an appropriate term anymore, but Indian summer, is that still okay to say?
I think so.
Right? I think it's
so.
fine.
Sure.
But that was a really special time for the band.
I can imagine so. It kind of lends to what we're talking about now with this reprinting, right? I mean,
Yeah,
a vinyl record 30 years later has got to feel pretty cool.
it does. You know, I am continuously surprised at how people care. Like anyone, you know, it is really interesting, and I'm grateful for Unoriginal Vinyl, thinking it's worth doing a re-release of this sort of warts and all first record we had, you know.
Sure. I think there's also not a better genre to listen to vinyl than ska. I don't know why. It just feels like it matches for some reason to me in my brain.
I don't know if you see in the back here, I've got a vinyl collection, and we're in this is where I listen to records. And yeah, I definitely think that anything recorded on digital medium, it's not really worth it.
Right. I agree.
But yeah, sort of 1970s through 1990s ska, or I should say 60s through 90s ska, very much worth it. There's just a warmth and separation that you get with the vinyl that you don't, that, you know, when things are produced the way they are nowadays, this digital wall of sound kind of thing, where there's, you know, 100 slave tracks back there or whatever, it's not that great. But when you listen to older records on vinyl, you do get much closer to the artist's intent. Like, I will tell you, listening to our record in the studio when we were making it, and things would play back, I was like, oh, this sounds great. And then you get the CD, you're like, oh, this doesn't sound that good.
Yeah.
Well, not
like
only that, but also, like, one of the things that I love about Jason and Unoriginal Vinyl is the fact that they bring the listener closer to the artist. You mentioned, like, a lot of the kind of original liner notes that you that they develop for
new liner notes, like, in fact.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just things like that where it's just you feel like so much more connected to the artist when you get this really special type of release. It's not just that they're putting this album on vinyl, it's that you really are getting a special connection to this album that you wouldn't have had before.
What's kind of fun, I don't know, I guess this would, if you really like that record, one thing that I did for the notes is I hadn't listened to it in 26 years.
Wow.
Right? And so I put on headphones and I went back and listened, and I don't know what, I did a live, like, as I was listening, I was kind of writing down thoughts and remembering the making of the songs, and so that's included in there too. I think if someone really likes that record, they could be interested in some of the sort of deep background of making those tracks.
Heck yeah. I'm sure people are going to eat that right up. 'Cause that's
especially because
it
was
cool
very
thing.
unprofessional. Like, it really was. Like, I was 19, Jason was 20, Tony was 20. Like, we were kids. And we're like, they gave us so much money. They gave us like $8,000 to make a record. This is great. You know, and just, we were, you know, I think that when I listen back to that record, it is just so earnest, right? It was before, like, no one had heard of us. And we were just popping with dumb ideas that we thought were great. And some of them did turn out pretty cool. But it is, I mean, we couldn't make that record now if we tried. Just couldn't
Yeah.
do it. It definitely comes from a time and a place and where we were in life, and yeah, that's why, sometimes first records by bands, there's warts on them, lots of them, performance, sonically, all that stuff. So some of the writing I wish I could have back, that's for sure. But also, the whole is much greater than the sum of the parts.
Right.
And so yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
So it's coming up on about 8 years since you guys played your last show. And yeah, I'm just kind of curious maybe what maybe you personally would hope for the Supertones moving forward. A lot of times we see a lot of these bands that we interview that, you probably maybe have played shows with or grew up loving. And, things are slower now because people have families and are working full time and everything. But they're still, maybe playing a handful of shows here and there. And maybe very slowly they release some new music. And, I know, like we've talked about Five Iron, they're kind of in that position now where they're all working full time, but they're playing a handful of shows each year. They're maybe slowly releasing music every now and then. And I'm just curious, like, is that like something you would hope for with the Supertones? Do you feel like very comfortable of it just being done? Like, I'm just curious, like, just in terms of your own like hopes around the Supertones moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, at this point we don't have any plans. We did definitely say, hey, we're done back then. We've been offered a couple of things to come out and play. It's tough, because I think for Supertones, being a live band was our calling card.
Yeah.
That's who we really were at our essence, and our best recordings are how we sound live, like the closest we could get to live. And so it just takes, when you're not playing all the time, you're just not sharp. There's just no two ways about it. And so I think doing something that's a diminished version of the Supertones is not very appealing to me.
Understandable.
Yeah. I don't know. You never say never, right? But as of now, there's no plans.
Okay.
Fair enough.
We'll keep crossing our fingers and our toes and everything, and hoping
I don't
that
know.
you'll come on out and
The thing is, though, is
get us again.
I mean, I'm 48 now. The other guys are 50, and all this stuff. It's just I don't know if we could ever be as good as we once were, and I would hate for people to come out and say, oh, I heard how the Supertones, they were this great live band, and then to see a diminished version of it and think that that's the Supertones. It's just there's a certain ephemeral quality to it.
I bet it's like riding a bike. I
Yeah.
bet you guys got on a stage, all of a sudden it's all gonna come back, and it's gonna feel exactly like it did 30
true.
years ago.
I think so.
I don't know.
I wouldn't be. You might be a little. You might be a little bit more
greatly doubt that.
gassed. You certainly might be a
Me?
little bit more gassed, but I bet it all comes back.
I'm 100 times more fit than I was back then.
I was gonna say you
Oh,
look more
okay,
fit
never mind
now
then.
than then.
Yeah, I'm in way better shape. I don't
You're-
I can
You're
see your
ready to-
traps and your,
you're
and
ready to
your delts
go.
just popping through that shirt right
Yeah.
now. I'm just saying.
Well, hey. No, yeah, like when we were doing it was funny because I didn't exercise except for playing some basketball back when we were doing, our full-time thing. And then when we came back and we were in our 30s, I had started running. I had started doing all this stuff. And I was like playing shows. I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much energy. Like it wasn't even close. It was funny because you'd be just dying during a show, getting towards the end of a show. Because if you ever saw a Supertones show, like it was a contact sport for real.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was funny, in my 30s and even I was 40 when we played our last show. It's so much easier when you exercise.
Well, it is fun to watch people skanking and everything at even like a Five Iron show. It's just unbelievable, like how many people are pushing, in their 40s, maybe even pushing, later 40s, and they're still in the pit skanking and doing the thing.
Absolutely.
And it might not be quite as roughhousey as it used to be, but it's still pretty intense.
I don't like that roughhousey stuff. I wanted people to dance.
Yeah, have some fun
That's
with
one of the
it.
things that really appealed to me. Is just you could be, not because when you went to punk shows and all this stuff, it's just like, I used to go see Fishbone. It was like getting crunched in there, and all these girls are just like fleeing the pit. But I liked that at a Supertone show, you get everybody to give some room, and you didn't have to be some some strapping, sweaty, jock dude to get up front. You could just have it be smaller and have a good time.
Sure.
Beautiful.
Well, speaking of having a good time, I think everyone's ready to have a good time hearing about your top 5 most influential albums, Matt.
Oh gosh, most influential albums. I am so when you get as old as me, right? Like it's too much. Like you have to choose.
Focus
and
in.
so I'm gonna go with albums that influenced the Supertones.
Okay.
Fair enough.
All right.
So kind of there's a cutoff point. I would say first and foremost, there is no bigger influence than the Operation Ivy album. We were chasing that album our whole career. Never caught it, but that one is massive.
That's a band that just we hear fairly frequently. Obviously from like folks that were mid to late 40s now, maybe early 50s. But I remember even like when we talked to some of the guys from Furnace Fest about like who were their white whales for Furnace Fest, like Operation Ivy would have been one of them. So I mean, they clearly are really, really important to like a certain generation of folks.
Absolutely, they're like the Velvet Underground of punk rock.
Yeah.
They didn't sell that much, but everybody that bought a CD started a band.
Right.
Yep. Exactly.
So yeah, that's far and away. I would say then the first Specials record was also huge.
Sure.
It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back by Public Enemy.
Yeah, there we go.
So one thing that the Supertones did a little different, I would say that I haven't heard since, is we brought hip hop to it.
Yeah.
Not only in vocal delivery, but even in some of the musical beds of the songs. If you listen to them, we're trying to, and I'm not just talking about a song like Chase the Sun, if you know that song, which has like a beat and all that stuff, but like the song Unite, which was one of our more popular songs. We didn't get the idea from that from any ska record. We got the idea from that from hip hop records.
Sure.
And in fact, there's a little, you could hear a little record scratch, like a digga when that song kicks in. That's actually pulled from the It Takes a Nation of Millions Public Enemy record.
Oh, killer.
We sampled that.
I didn't realize that.
Wow.
It's on Rhythm and the Rebel. Yes, The Rhythm, the Rebel. It's the same. So that one's big.
Now I'm going to go back and listen, and I'm only going to hear that. I love it.
Yeah, A/B that. No, it really, we really did just pull it. And
cool.
even we pulled the kick drum from that because we didn't have an 808 in the studio. So there's an 808 on that record, and it's sampled from the Public Enemy record.
Nice.
Yeah. Another one that was huge for us, just so influential in vibe and kind of even our ethos and like our sound, our attitude was Ill Communication by the Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
That
I
was
feel
really
that.
big.
I feel that in most of your records. It's
Exactly right.
that kind of that raw energy feeling.
Yep.
Very, very similar.
Definitely. We wanted to be the Beastie Boys in a lot of ways. And and yeah, they just had a way of making an exciting track that wasn't metal.
Mm-hmm.
I think having power and having punchiness that isn't metal is kind of like it's a thing in and of itself.
Yes.
It's hard to do, but like we wanted to make really exciting, powerful music live that wasn't like headbanging. And so Beastie Boys kind of had that down. And then for a fifth record, boy, man, it's hard. But whenever you get the last one, it's like a 10-way tie, right?
Right.
It's hard to overlook the Selector Too Much Pressure. That's a big one. Boy, there's so many local bands we loved so much. Like that's the thing, is there was all these local ska bands and bands in the scene that we were listening to a ton that never made it anywhere that were huge influences.
Sure.
Meal Ticket, for instance, they never got anywhere.
Meal
Stretch
Ticket.
Armstrong.
That's a great name too.
Yeah, let's go bowling. We wore that stuff out. Ocean's 11. They never made it anywhere. They literally just had a demo that we listened to a bunch.
Well, they did make a movie. I mean, so there's that.
They did make a movie. That's a
Brad
good
Pitt
point.
was in the band.
You think they could have gotten further? Boy, I'm gonna have to go. Have to go with "London Calling" by the Clash.
Oh,
Good call.
that's
Good
a
call.
That
great
was a
call.
big one too. Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
That's a band that I don't know why, but maybe like 10, 15 years ago, I feel like I would have heard them mentioned more for influential artists. And, obviously to some degree they certainly are, but for some reason, you just don't hear about them much anymore for some reason. And I've never really understood that.
It's a crime.
Maybe it's just like as like more, at one point, 2000s, 90s, so much like alternative, guitar driven music was so popular for a while. And I wonder if, so many of those bands were influenced by the Clash, but now that you just like don't see as much guitar driven music in mainstream music, maybe we just don't hear about the Clash anymore. I don't know what it is, but you just don't hear about them as much anymore.
True.
Yeah.
It's because
I
everyone's
guess so.
favorite artist now is Machine Gun Kelly. So, they're all trying to rip off Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. I can't really speak to that. I would say, your measure of you can't tell the story of this genre without this group. I say you can't tell the story of rock and roll without the Clash.
Yeah. I
Right.
agree.
They're one of the greatest, maybe top 5 rock bands ever. If
Yeah,
rock
at
is
least
the
in
right thing.
influential nature, right? I mean, in terms of their
Influential, but I'm just
influentialness.
saying,
yeah.
even looking at the music they made and holding it up against Led Zeppelin or the Who or any, they belong right there. They're top.
Wow.
Yeah.
They are an incredible band. Wow.
They are.
Well, that is actually, I don't know what it is, but for some reason I'm a little surprised by this list. In a good way. Like I'm actually very pleasantly
Who were you
surprised by this
expecting?
list. I don't know why, but obviously you mentioned a lot of like there was a lot of Tooth and Nail influence of why you guys even wanted to be on Tooth and Nail. So I was thinking maybe more of those artists, but I love the fact that like Public Enemy's on this. I love the fact that the Clash is on this, Operation Ivy. So and obviously you can hear those sounds in Supertones, but I'm glad to know that like some of the important artists around that time were artists that influenced your sound.
Well, I think that if you were to poll most of the Tooth and Nail artists of that time, they weren't influenced by Tooth and Nail.
Right.
Right, that's true.
Hadn't been around long enough yet. Even.
Hadn't been around. Now we were into it definitely, and so I mean, obviously there's going to be some influence, but we weren't really looking to. We didn't want to sound like any of those bands. The one exception. Here's one thing I would say, and it's not an album, but. So kind of one of the things that really drew were the hardcore bands.
Mm-hmm.
Unashamed, who our drummer actually played in that band. Unashamed and Focused. Did you guys know any of these records?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah.
It was like the first couple years of Tooth and Nail, and these hardcore
Right.
bands, they would draw a couple hundred people around SoCal, and these shows were just intense, you know what I mean? And they put so much into the live performance. I didn't like the music, to be honest.
Sure.
But I did find the live performances compelling, and I would say that our performance style was heavily influenced by the hardcore scene of SoCal.
yeah.
That's cool.
Like you just kind of go all in, and so yeah, I definitely think that in a non-musical level, just on a performance sense, those early Tooth and Nail bands were heavily influential.
I like that cross-pollination kind of situation, right? I mean, we talked about the Beastie Boys just a moment ago, and they did the same thing with pump music. They
Totally.
just put it into hip-hop,
Well, I mean, they literally started out as a hardcore punk band.
Right, exactly. You take a little bit of the energy from those hardcore shows and you throw it into an OC Supertone show. I mean, it's
No doubt.
it's fantastic. It's brilliant. That's a fun thing. And you'd see this even with like pop stars nowadays. There's tons and tons of pop stars that listen to some pretty extreme heavy music
Yeah.
And
I heard Olivia Rodrigo's latest record. I was like, this sounds like, like something Bikini Kill would do or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Paramore or something.
Yeah.
Well, I think Paramore like sued her at one point or something.
Really?
No, they didn't sue her, but they had like a nice agreement with one another. I think the label tried to sue or something like that.
See.
But
Yeah.
no, they had a fun agreement. There's a story behind that. I have to go back and look.
You know what's funny? There's this country artist, Max McNown.
Okay.
You heard of him?
No.
I'm not familiar.
So I had never heard of him. Ethan, who played in the Supertones for a long time, he's like his band leader now, and it turns out he's like grew up on the Supertones. And he's singing like I guess it's Americana. It's like pop Americana, I think is the right.
Okay. I can handle that a lot more.
I think.
Yeah.
Huh?
I can handle that a lot more than just like your radio country these days.
Oh no, it's just it's good. I mean, if you listen to it, it's good. But like, yeah, he grew up on our group. It's like, what? I would never in a million years have thought that we would be anywhere in this dude's psyche.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's in there.
It is weird to think that there is, at least at one point, there was a genre of music that had the energy of a hardcore show, but had literally trumpets and trombones on stage.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is, it's amazing that combination existed at one point in history, and still does.
Look at Rocket from the Crypt too. Rocket from the Crypt was a hard music band that had horns too.
Sure.
Yeah. You ever heard them?
Real quick, I do have a question related to what I would view as like the most modern version of ska, at least in terms of like, cultural relevancy. I don't know if you've ever heard of like Brass Against or some of those bands that do like a lot of like covers and stuff like that, but they're essentially ska versions of big hits.
Time-honored tradition, actually, in ska and reggae.
Very, very
all the
true.
way back to the 60s.
Very, very true. Yeah, you should go check some of those out. They're tons and tons of energy, big sound. They're a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. Matt, what do you want to plug? Obviously the vinyl is out, right? And hasn't been sold out, right?
I'm sorry?
The vinyl, like the vinyl hasn't already been sold out or anything, has it?
Sold out?
Like meaning
gone?
like you can still buy copies of it, right?
As far as I know.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Okay.
I don't know how long supplies will last, so if you're thinking about getting one, you should probably get it.
I will say you definitely should, because a lot of times when we have discussed one of these reprints from unoriginal vinyl, they're right on the cusp of being sold out. So I have no doubts this is going to be the same thing. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Adventures of the OC Supertones. Who knows when there'll be another printing?
That's right. It does appear that at least on the Tooth and Nail website, it's still available.
Okay.
Good deal.
So
I know they didn't
does
make
seem
many.
to be available.
I know they only pressed a few hundred, so.
Yeah.
Get on it then. Get on it.
Mm-hmm.
Great, wonderful. So yeah, that's out. Anything else you'd like to plug?
Well, I do think this isn't. I don't really have anything to do with this, but apparently there is a documentary that one of our mix engineers turned out to be a serial killer.
What?
And so I think
what for what album?
For the Chase the Sun record.
Okay.
Wow.
A serial killer in California or where?
Yeah. All
God.
throughout California.
And
There's
he's
a lot
caught
of
and
them out in
everything?
California, and so yeah, I forget what he was. They all have names.
Yeah.
But I think he was the seltzer water killer, something like that.
The seltzer
Drown people in seltzer
the
water.
LaCroix killer or something like that.
No, there was no LaCroix back then. This was in the 90s. But yeah, this guy's sitting there working on our record, and
So this happened in the
apparently
90s.
Yeah, he had corpses in his trunk
Oh
of his
my
car and
gosh.
stuff. It's crazy.
Wow. But you never got like a whiff of it or anything? Like you never got the sense that he was doing all this nonsense?
Oh. I mean, you know how your memory colors things when you're like, once you find out, you're like, oh, I saw it all along. But no,
Right,
not
right.
at all. I mean, seemed to
Wow.
be a completely normal
So-
person.
Typical psychopath then.
Gee.
Yeah, I think he was Canadian.
Was he at least a good mixer?
I mean, listen to the record.
Do you know how many he killed?
How many did I guess I don't know. I just heard about this.
Whoa.
I'm looking
I'm
up
not even sure
Wikipedia
that
quick. It does look like maybe potentially there are 5 confirmed and 7. There could be up to 7 though, but 5
Right.
confirmed.
Holy cow.
that sounds right.
Wow, that is. How does it feel to be so close to death? Like when you look back on this now, you're like you could have easily become one of the victims. Like
And why didn't
Yeah.
he choose you? Like,
Well, we hired him.
yeah, but why do you think that he didn't?
Oh, why
that he
was I not
spared you?
good enough?
Yeah,
It's like,
why
wouldn't
did he
wanna
spare
murder
you
me?
and the rest of the band? Yeah.
I don't know. We had a good relationship.
Fair enough. I
Maybe
mean,
it's because you're both
usually-
killers, you know? Like you guys were killing in the studio and and he was killing for real, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
I
he
mean,
didn't want
did a
that.
good mix.
He didn't want to see what that trombone can do.
He didn't want that smoke.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, we don't look like pushovers, I suppose.
That is true.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah.
5 Iron, it could be a different story, but Supertones, you don't mess with the Supertones.
That's right.
You don't. No. Yeah.
So, well, that is. I'm glad you survived to tell the tale.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it'll emotionally hit me at some point. I'm not sure if I'll watch the documentary.
Oh, there's a documentary coming out too. I didn't know
Yeah, that's
that
what
part.
I was telling you. That this just.
Is this
they're
like on
working a
Netflix or
documentary.
is it one of those true crime
not sure.
Netflix ones?
I'm not sure. I think that they're making it, and then the streaming services bid for it or something like that.
Okay.
I hope it's all OC Supertone songs for the soundtrack because I think that juxtaposition of
He
like,
mixed for a
happy
lot of
punk.
people. He mixed for a lot of people. I'm not
Okay.
sure. Yeah. That absolutely like some of our more happy-go-lucky tunes to
Yeah.
juxtapose and make it extra chilling.
That'd be a great creative direction.
He
for
was
the documentary.
mixing
think so.
this while he was doing this.
Love it. Well, Matt, thank you so much for chatting about the Supertones. Again, this is
Yeah.
just one of the cooler interviews to do, just with how legendary the Supertones are. So thanks so much for chatting, and good luck on the vinyl. Looks like it's doing well, and really, really cool to just get connected. So thanks so much.
Great talking to you guys. Thanks for having me.